What happens when a prince walks into a studio expecting admiration and walks out questioning everything he thought he knew? The lights in the View studio shone with calculated brilliance, casting a crisp glow over the polished round table and the array of guests lined up for the day's broadcast. But behind the studio's familiar warmth, there was a storm brewing, one that not even the seasoned producers could have predicted. Megyn Kelly adjusted the cuff of her blazer as she took her seat at the table. She wasn't just here to co-host. She was here with a purpose. Known for her sharp tongue and fearless journalism, today was no different. The theme of the show was media responsibility and public narrative. But Kelly had a feeling things were going to veer far off script. Please welcome Prince Harry, Whoopi Goldberg announced, her tone as polished as ever, but carrying an unmistakable undertone of caution. The audience erupted in polite applause as Harry stepped into the frame, his familiar half-smile plastered across his face. Dressed casually in a navy suit with no tie, he exuded his usual down-to-earth charm, but he didn't know he had just walked into a lion's den. "Thank you for having me," Harry said as he took his seat beside Kelly. She didn't return the smile. "Prince Harry," she began, tone measured, "you've spoken often about the importance of truth in media, yet you've built a brand by turning your own life into a spectacle. Help me understand, is this about truth or profit?" The studio tensed. Joy Behar blinked rapidly. Sarah Haynes shifted uncomfortably. The audience, still smiling from the applause, grew still. Harry's expression twitched for just a moment. "I believe in owning my story, in correcting false narratives." "Interesting," Kelly replied smoothly, "because from the outside, it doesn't look like correction. It looks like monetization. Tell-alls, docuseries, podcasts. Where's the line between telling your truth and selling it?" Harry's jaw stiffened. "There's a difference between defending yourself and exploiting others. I've been lied about. My wife's been vilified. I have every right to respond." Kelly leaned in slightly. "You claim to want privacy, but you've given more interviews than most politicians. You've attacked your own family on global platforms. Yet you still use the title, still cash in on the royal brand. Isn't that a contradiction?" Silence. This wasn't the cozy celebrity chat Harry had expected. It was a cross-examination. He straightened in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly. "There's a difference between the institution and my family, the monarchy and the people in it." "Are you sure you believe that?" Kelly countered. "Because every time things get uncomfortable, you blur that line. You use the crying when it helps you, and you condemn it when it doesn't." The air was thick now. The audience hung on every word. Harry's smile was gone. "You're simplifying a very painful history," he said, his voice colder now. "You didn't grow up under that spotlight. You didn't lose your mother to the same machine you represent." Kelly didn't flinch. "Your mother's death was a tragedy, yes, but are you honoring her by dragging your family through the mud? By turning grief into content?" Harry's hand clenched around his water bottle. "My wife suffered suicidal thoughts because of media attacks," he said, his voice sharp now. "Do you understand that?" Kelly's reply was swift. "And I hope she got the help she needed, but weaponizing that pain to silence criticism? That's not accountability. That's manipulation." Whoopi raised a hand gently. "Let's take a breath here." But Kelly wasn't finished. "No, Whoopi, this is exactly the conversation people are afraid to have. Because Harry here," she gestured towards him without breaking eye contact, "sells himself as a victim of the institution, while living in a mansion, protected, wealthy, and constantly in front of a camera." Harry's face flushed. "You don't know what I've lived through. And yet you expect the world to sympathize," Kelly shot back. "You want privacy, respect, and space, all while signing Netflix deals and ghostwriting grievances. So which is it, a private life or a public platform you control?" The studio was now entirely silent. Joy Behar looked like she wanted to vanish. Sarah nervously checked her cue cards, but all eyes remained locked on Harry, who was visibly shaken. "You came here to talk about your foundation," Kelly continued, her voice razor sharp. "But instead you walked into a real conversation, one the public has been dying to have. You want accountability from everyone else. Let's see if you can take some yourself. Harry stared at her for a long moment, and for the first time since he entered the room, he didn't have a response. Prince Harry sat rigidly in his chair, his posture still royal, but his face betrayed the storm brewing beneath. Megyn Kelly hadn't just landed punches. She'd torn open every public contradiction he'd tried to keep neatly sealed behind PR-crafted talking points. "I didn't come here to be attacked," Harry finally said, his voice tight but controlled. "You came here to be heard," Megyn replied, "and that's exactly what I'm doing, listening. But listening means asking questions too. Questions your fans might not like, but the rest of the world is definitely thinking." Joy Behar interjected weakly, "Maybe we should steer this back to the foundation work." "No," Harry interrupted, his tone firm now. "Let's stay here. Apparently this is the interview I agreed to." He turned to Kelly, his eyes dark. "You talk about contradiction. Fine. Let's talk about yours. You spent years criticizing the media. You've spoken out against cancel culture, against mob mentality. And yet here you are, part of the same machine, feeding the same outrage." Kelly leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. "I'm not canceling anyone, Harry. I'm holding someone accountable. That's not the same thing, and you know it." "I've taken accountability," he snapped. "I left the institution. I walked away from privilege. I built a life from scratch." "With multi-million-dollar deals and global fame already waiting," she retorted. "Come on, Harry. You didn't start from zero. You started from a royal runway. Most people can't leave a toxic job and end up in a Montecito mansion." The audience chuckled nervously. Harry didn't smile. "You think it's about the money?" he said, his voice rising. "Do you have any idea what it's like to watch your wife cry at night because strangers dissect her every word? Because the press twists her silence into guilt and her words into scandal?" "I do," Megyn said flatly. "I lived through it too, without a title, without security, and without the world treating me like royalty." The words landed harder than expected. Harry blinked. "For years," she continued, "I was hounded for my opinions, my wardrobe, even my tone of voice. But I didn't move to another country and throw my colleagues under the bus. I didn't call my industry evil and then sell my story to the highest bidder. I didn't have a choice," Harry's voice cracked. "You don't know what it's like to grow up as someone's headline. To be told how to walk, talk, even grieve." "No, I don't," Kelly agreed. "But I do know what it's like to be expected to rise above it. You say you didn't have a choice, but your brother had the same life, and he didn't write a book blaming his entire family." A wave of murmurs rolled through the audience. Harry's jaw clenched. "You're obsessed with comparing me to William." "I'm holding you to the standard you set," she said. "You claim to want peace, then why drop bombs? You claim to protect your family, then why sell private conversations? Every time you speak out, you hurt the very people you say you're trying to protect." He didn't respond. Kelly didn't wait. "You talk about media harm," she pressed. "Let's talk about the fallout from your words. Your father's approval ratings plummeted after your interview. Your brother was dragged through headlines. Your grandmother, the Queen, spent her final year watching her family fracture in public. That's not bravery, Prince Harry. That's betrayal." A visible wave of discomfort washed over the other hosts. Whoopi stared into the monitor, uncertain. Joy pursed her lips. Sarah scribbled something on her notes but didn't look up. But Kelly was locked in. And Harry looked shaken. "I loved my grandmother," he said, quieter now. "And I know she loved me." "Then why couldn't that love have been enough to make you stop?" Kelly asked softly. "Why wasn't that love enough to make you protect what she stood for?" That question, low, surgical, devastating, hung in the air like a guillotine. For the first time, Harry looked genuinely at a loss. He swallowed. The corner of his mouth twitched. The audience held their breath. "I thought I was protecting her legacy," he said finally. "Then maybe," Kelly said slowly, "you misunderstood what her legacy really was." The camera zoomed in on Harry's face, torn between pride and pain. Before anyone else could speak, Whoopi raised her hand. "All right," Isaudi said gently. "We'll take a quick break." But it wasn't just a commercial break. It was a moment to breathe. because the tension in the studio had reached its boiling point, and they all knew it wasn't over yet. The commercial break ended, but the tension in the studio hadn't gone anywhere. When the cameras returned, the audience was quieter than before, not because they weren't engaged, but because they were stunned. What had started as a routine segment had turned into an emotional boxing match, and neither fighter was backing down. Harry sat with his hands clasped tightly in his lap, as if gripping his own restraint. His jawline was stiff, his breath shallow. Megyn Kelly, on the other hand, looked composed, but her eyes were sharp, unrelenting. She hadn't just drawn blood, she was following the scent. Joy Behar, always the one to lighten the mood, tried to intervene. So, Harry, let's talk about your foundation. I know you're doing great work with veterans and mental health. Maybe we can— No, Harry said suddenly, his voice cutting through the room like a cold gust. Let's finish what we started. Kelly arched a brow, surprised, but not deterred. All right then, she said. Let's talk about authenticity. Harry narrowed his eyes. Meaning? Meaning the persona, she said. You talk about being vulnerable, about being real, but everything you present feels curated. Even your vulnerability is packaged. How do you expect people to trust your message if everything about it feels like branding? His nostrils flared slightly. That's unfair. I've been more open than any royal in history. And that might be part of the problem, Kelly shot back, because in being open, you've torn down every institution that shaped you. You say you want to modernize the monarchy, but what you've done looks a lot more like sabotage. I'm trying to protect my family, Harry said firmly, from the same system that destroyed my mother. Then why expose them more, Kelly asked, her voice rising slightly. Why put your children in documentaries? Why sign book deals that rehash private family moments? You don't protect something by throwing it into a spotlight. Harry leaned forward. I'm not the one who chased my mother into a tunnel. Kelly didn't blink. No, but you've spent years weaponizing that loss. You've made it the cornerstone of your narrative. And yes, I'm saying that out loud because someone needs to. He stared at her, stunned. You think I'm using her death? I think you've never processed it, she said, her tone cooler now, almost maternal. And instead of healing, you've built a brand around that pain, around being the wounded prince. And now, every time someone challenges you, even gently, you recoil like you're being attacked. You don't know me, he whispered. You made sure the world would, she replied. Sarah Haynes finally chimed in, her voice tentative. Harry, I think what Megyn is trying to say— No, Harry snapped, holding up a hand. Let her speak for herself. She clearly doesn't need help throwing punches. Kelly gave a tight smile. I don't, but I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to hold you to the same standard the rest of us are held to. That's what journalism is supposed to do. Speak truth to power. And you don't think royalty has power? He asked bitterly. I think you had it, she said, and then you ran from it. And now you want sympathy for the cost of your own choices. He scoffed. So I should have stayed quiet. Let them keep lying about us. Let my wife get torn apart. No, she said. You should have risen above it. The same way your grandmother did. The same way your brother does, whether you like him or not. That hit a nerve. Harry's lips parted slightly, as if preparing a defense, but no words came. Kelly pressed further. You say you're misunderstood, that you're just trying to be human. But when people criticize you, you call it an attack. When journalists ask hard questions, you call it harassment. When public opinion turns, you call it betrayal. At what point do you look in the mirror and say, maybe this is on me? He looked away. For the first time, the camera captured the moment, the slight sag of his shoulders, the glassiness in his eyes. But just as quickly, he straightened up again. You don't understand the pressures I was under, he said, voice low. The constant fear, the never-ending cameras, the expectations. It's not something you survive without scars. Kelly softened for a beat. I don't doubt the scars. I just question what you've done with them. Another silence fell, deeper than before. It wasn't the kind of silence that begged to be broken. It was the kind that said something just shifted. Whoopi glanced at the teleprompter and then back at the two of them. We'll be right back, she said quietly. The screen faded to black, But no one watching believed this was over, not even close. The cameras rolled again, but the energy had changed. There was no more pretense of civility, no more fluffy questions or scripted transitions. This was no longer a morning talk show. It was a reckoning. Prince Harry sat with his arms crossed now, eyes slightly narrowed, lips pressed tight. Megyn Kelly, still poised, had shifted ever so slightly forward in her seat, as if daring him to throw one more stone her way. And he did. "You sit there and call yourself a journalist," Harry said, his voice cutting through the tension. "But what you're doing isn't journalism. It's provocation. You came here with an agenda, to humiliate me." Kelly gave a half smile. "I came here with questions. If the answers are uncomfortable, that's not on me. That's on you." Joy Behar cleared her throat, visibly uneasy. "Guys, maybe we should remember this is live television." Kelly didn't even turn. "And maybe it's time live television stopped sugarcoating the truth." Harry leaned forward, his tone low and sharp. "You think you're holding me accountable? You think this is noble? You're just another person exploiting grief and pain to boost your ratings." "No," Kelly replied, her tone calm but unyielding. "What I'm doing is holding someone with immense privilege and power accountable for the consequences of their actions. You talk about being chaste. I'm talking about the damage you've done while running." The words landed heavy. "You threw your family under a bus," she continued, her voice gaining force. "You accused them of racism on global television. You exposed personal conversations. You wrote about private royal events, all while insisting you wanted peace." "I wanted truth," Harry snapped. Kelly didn't blink. "And did you find it? Or did you just trade one palace for another? Only this time, one where you're king and no one's allowed to question you?" The crowd audibly gasped. Harry's composure began to slip again. "You don't know what it's like to be born into a world where you don't own your name, your story, your voice." "I don't," Kelly admitted. "But I do know what it's like to have to fight for credibility every day. Without a title, without sympathy, without millions in the bank." You talk about trauma, but for the average viewer watching this, trauma doesn't come with a Netflix deal. "You think money fixes this?" Harry said, his voice rising. "My wife wanted to die. My mother did die. You sit here dissecting my life like it's a chessboard. But these are real people, Megyn." "And I respect that," she replied. "But when you step into the public arena, when you publish a memoir, when you give interview after interview, you invite scrutiny. You don't get to light the fire and then blame everyone else for the heat." Sarah Haynes jumped in, her voice shaky. "Let's maybe bring this back to something lighter. Perhaps your work with Invictus?" "No," Harry said sharply again. "We're here now. We finished this." He turned back to Kelly, eyes blazing. "You want to know what it's like to lose your mother to a pack of photographers? To wake up every day with her image on the front page? To hear people like you say it was her fault?" Kelly's face hardened. "I never said it was her fault. I said there were choices, difficult ones, human ones, but choices. And acting like she was a flawless saint stripped of agency does not honor her. It turns her into a weapon." That word, weapon, hung in the air like a knife mid-throw. Harry's voice dropped into a near whisper. "You're unbelievable." Kelly didn't flinch. And yet, here we are. A hush fell again over the studio. Finally, Whoopi spoke, slow, measured. "Maybe we should all take a breath." But Kelly wasn't done. "One last question," she said, turning toward Harry, "and I want you to answer it honestly." He hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "If you could go back," she asked, "to the moment before you did the Oprah interview, before the memoir, before the deals, would you still choose to speak out, knowing the damage it's caused to your father, your brother, the crown, your country? Would you do it again?" Harry's face went blank. For the first time, he looked tired, really tired. "I don't know," he admitted. And that silence, that single moment of hesitation, was louder than any argument that had come before it. Kelly didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just nodded. "Then maybe you're starting to understand what accountability really feels like." The audience was dead silent, and for the first time, it was Harry who broke eye contact. The air inside the studio was brittle, as if one wrong breath could shatter everything. Prince Harry sat still, his gaze now lowered. The defiant prince from the earlier segments seemed to have shrunk into himself, cloaked in the weight of a question he couldn't answer. Would you do it again? The silence was more powerful than any applause. Megyn Kelly didn't move. She sat calmly, her hands folded neatly, but there was no triumph in her expression. No smirk, just an unwavering stare that had broken through layers of royalty, PR polish, and scripted narrative. Finally, Harry looked up. I came here to talk about my foundation, he said, voice steady but quiet. To share the work I'm doing with veterans, with children, not to be put on trial. You weren't put on trial, Kelly replied. You were asked questions, the same questions millions of people ask at home. You just didn't expect them to be asked here. Joy Behar spoke up gently. Harry, I think people admire your honesty, I do, but they're also confused, hurt. They don't understand why you've chosen this path. I chose it, he said, because staying would have killed us. Kelly leaned in slightly. Then maybe that's what you should have led with, not the finger pointing, not the headlines, just the truth. Harry blinked. Sarah Haynes added, there's a difference between sharing your pain and selling it. That's where people struggle to connect with you. The prince nodded slowly. I see that now. He turned toward the camera, his voice finding rhythm again. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I wanted to protect my wife. I wanted to protect my children. I wanted to protect my mother's legacy. But somewhere along the way, I lost control of the narrative. Kelly said nothing, not this time. She simply let him speak. I didn't realize, Harry continued, that in trying to take back my voice, I might have silenced others. That in exposing my pain, I might have exposed wounds that weren't mine to share. The audience remained frozen, but the mood had changed. This wasn't confrontation anymore. It was revelation. I've made mistakes, Harry admitted, not because I'm malicious, but because I'm hurt. And maybe that's what I should have owned from the beginning. Kelly finally spoke. Her voice was soft now, but clear. Then start owning it, because being a victim and being accountable aren't mutually exclusive. Pain doesn't excuse destruction, but it can't explain it. The question is, what will you do with that understanding now? Harry stared at her and then, almost imperceptibly, nodded. I'll do better. Whoopi Goldberg, who had been unusually quiet, let out a breath. Well, that was something. A few audience members chuckled, nervously, softly, the kind of sound people make when they're unsure if it's okay to move again. We'll be right back, Whoopi said. Or maybe we all just need a nap. As the show faded to a commercial, no one applauded, not because it hadn't been powerful, but because clapping would have felt shallow. What had unfolded wasn't just an interview. It was a reckoning, a dismantling of a carefully curated narrative. And in its place, perhaps for the first time, stood a man stripped of titles, stripped of spin, raw, real, and maybe, just maybe, beginning to understand what the world had been trying to tell him all along. Backstage, Harry removed his microphone in silence. Kelly stood as well, not offering a handshake, but not turning away either. Their eyes met, and in that one final glance, there was no hatred, no triumph, no bitterness, just understanding. And maybe on both sides, a little bit of regret.